My name is Nidal Bitar. I'm the CEO of the ICT Association of Jordan, Intaj. I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. This is very exceptional topic, actually, and it's very important and vital topic, digital transformation strategy. I would like also to extend special appreciation and sincere gratitude for Frontiers Global for organizing this in partnership with Intaj and bringing with us two great caliber in this domain. Actually, this will be very useful and I'm sure it's going to be fruitful for all the audience. So thank you, Frontiers Global. Thank you, Hiba Atiyah, the CEO of Frontiers Global for making this happen. Now I will start introducing our two great experts in the domain of digital transformation strategy. Thank you for being with us, Michael Adingwa and Jibenga Lasisi. I would like to talk a little bit about Michael before starting. Michael is the Director of Digital Strategy at Cognizant, which is a digital transformation global giant. One of the examples of the projects which Michael delivered was digital transformation of Rwanda with Rwanda Central Bank, as he was the project lead for this project. Michael also was heavily involved in Jomo Pay project here in Jordan, so you know more about what's happening in Jordan. Thank you, Michael, for being with us. And we have Mr. Jibenga Lasisi, who is the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Capital One Bank in the US, which is a well-known, and their expertise is in the digital transformation strategy and technology on national levels, where they implemented across countries levels digital transformation projects. Also, Mr. Lasisi handled digital transformation implementation with the World Bank across all countries. Welcome, and I look forward to a great session. This is very important session actually for not just for Jordan, but for the region and also globally, especially during and post-COVID. I will leave it for any one of you who would like to start. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Nidal, for the introduction. We are also very honored and happy to be here today to share some of our perspectives and some of our experiences over the past few years that digital transformation is becoming more critical for executives to be able to compete as the world continues to change in this digital era. So I hope everybody will find this session very useful and they can learn one or two things that they can take back to their companies to start creating value. But right before we start, I would like to ask a quick question to our audience. And if you don't mind, if you can post it on the chat, is what do you intend to get out of this session today? What would you like to get out of this session today? So if you can please type on the chat bar so that we can see it. We'll give about two minutes for people to type their responses.
The chat is on the right of everyone, so waiting. We have a minute and a half left.
So I think there are two places where people can type. So I don't know if Eva or anyone can see what's in the chart. I believe that's not open for everyone. So maybe the host can see if there are questions coming in through the chat, and if there's other questions coming in through a Q&A section as well. The Q&A side of the chat.
Okay. Okay.
I learned from many questions that and everybody is sure that they want to know, and we have here some answers. Who are the stakeholders of digital transformation strategy of a country? This is this is someone from IAD. And there is Muhannad Shaddad, the change of cybersecurity and your experience on that. So it seems cybersecurity is an important topic within this digital transformation in general. I'm sure there are many other answers within this, so you can start if you like.
Yeah. So thank you for those that submitted those questions. And I think they're very interesting questions. So one of the questions is, who are the stakeholders for digital transformation strategy of a country? And the second question is the challenge of cybersecurity and your experience on that. So I think when we go through this session, a lot of the answers to these questions will come up. So let's go to the next slide, please. Eva. So
there is an answer from Mustafa Zaidan. If you like to read it.
Need to understand from your experience the digital strategy structure for a financial institution, stakeholders, digital strategy challenges, and how to overcome them. So that's also a fantastic question. And I believe we would answer all these questions as we go through this presentation. So let's go through briefly what the content will look like. So we will go through what we mean by digital transformation. Like, everybody's talking about digital transformation now all over the world, but what does it truly mean? And two, we would also look at the key trends and forces that are driving digital transformation. Some of this, you are beginning to see them yourselves, and some of it, maybe you haven't seen them. So we will go through all those trends and the implications of those trends on your businesses, on the country, and also the global market as a whole. And three, we will talk about the digital transformation framework, which means what are the key elements you need to start looking at, especially if you're trying to create your own digital transformation strategy. If you're already in the digital transformation journey and you're thinking about what should I prioritize, how should I invest my funds, and so on and so forth, we will talk about what those key elements are. And then four, we will take a deep dive into the digital transformation framework. And we would look at 4 key areas, which is how do you digitize your customer experience? And how do you digitize your organization as a whole? How do you digitize your operations and systems? And how do you build the right data and analytics capability to be able to be successful in your digital transformation strategy? And number 5, we will talk about the approach, like how would you actually go on to start building the strategy itself, and some of the things you need to take into consideration. And number 6, we will actually give you some use cases and some of the benefits that you should be expecting when you implement any digital transformation initiative. And this also will be based on some case studies of what we see that other organizations are using. So this is what we'll try to cover. We know we don't have a lot of time, but we will try to, cover this as much as we can and also answer questions as much as we can. If you have any question during the process, you can always post your questions on the chat, and we will address those questions as we go on through this process. Next slide, please. So to start with, we have these 3 insights from world-renowned organizations like the Harvard Business Review, the MIT Sloan Management Review, and the International Data Corporation. And they have done a lot of research, and they've shown what the research says when it comes to digital transformation. So the first one you see on the blue banner up there is by Harvard. And what they've said is that organizations that rank higher in digital transformation indices obtain much high gross margins, earnings, and net income than organizations that rank lower. And what do we mean by the indices? So the indices would be the technology, the processes, the data, and also the organization. Those are the 4 indices. Now, some of you are, most of you are probably familiar with the technology, with the data, with the processes. But a lot of focus is also on the organization. And when I talk about organization, it's about change management that has to take place or that has to be in place for digital transformation to be successful. So we're talking about the leadership. We're talking about the emotional intelligence. We're talking about the courage and the teamwork, because digital transformation is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of changing the way we think and changing the way we approach things. So these are the indices. And what Harvard Business Review is saying here is that for organizations that have invested more in those things, it actually translates more into gross margins, earnings. In fact, there's a new research that is being done by Dell, where Dell sampled about 4,600 organizations around the world. And they were saying, okay, for people that have invested in digital transformation, what are the results? And they found out that of the 4,600 organizations, of the people that have invested in digital transformation, productivity and profitability actually went up by 62%, right? And revenue growth, customer retention, net promoter score, which you call customer advocacy, all those actually went up by more than 50%. So there's really a strong case for digital transformation, right? There's another one by MIT that says 27% of global executives rate digital transformation as a matter of survival. And we've seen that with COVID, I'm sure this 27% is probably now like 80%, because with COVID, if you don't embrace digital transformation, the company is probably going to die. So these are a lot of research that renowned organizations have shown that the way forward for organization is really about embracing digital transformation. Iba, can you go to the next slide? So when we talk about digital transformation, there are 2 key questions that most CEOs are thinking about now. What does the company of the future looks like? And how do I get there? Now, there's so many definitions of digital transformation out there, but I think for this session, we can all have some kind of agreement that digital transformation is having a plan, but also to be able to execute on the plan or the strategy by leveraging digital technologies, right, to transform our business models. Now, there's a whole way that we've been doing things. We call it the traditional model, and we will go through it in this session. And there's a need to invest funds in building capabilities, technological capabilities, for us to be able to play and operate the digital way. And we'll talk about it as well. So when we think about digital transformation, we should start thinking about it from those 5 elements you have down there, which is about 1, your customer. How do I connect and create value for my customer in this digital era? Because customers are now more demanding. Customers' expectation of the organizations is now significantly higher. And the way customers interact now, it's a lot different. So we have to keep on thinking, how do I connect and create value for my customer? The second is innovation. How do I quickly design and launch my products into the market as quick as possible? Back in the days, organizations would take months or even years to develop products to put in the market. But now people are developing products and it's getting into the market in a matter of weeks or even days. People are transforming from your typical SDLC approach to software development to more agile, more iterative approach that launches the product into the market. These are the things that digital transformation tries to address. Competition, how do I compete in the market? All right. Back then, we're thinking about rivalry, about my competitors, and how do I bring down my competitors? But now it's all about collaborating. How do I collaborate better with my competitors to actually create value for everybody within the ecosystem? Data. Now, think about data. Data is everywhere around us, right? Structured data, unstructured data, it's everywhere. Within our organization, intrinsic data or even external data. How do we make sense of all this data? Now, there's people talk about big data and analytics. Is it possible for us to bring all those data together and create insights on the customers to create better value? And those are the things we will try to address during this session. And then what really is the value to our customers? Because of their changing preferences, we need to be able to understand what exactly is value to customers in this day and time. And those customers are different. What is a value to what we call the Generation Z is different from what is value to a millennial, is different from what is a value to baby boomers. So Generation Z, people say those are, the young population. I think they're born, 1982 and upwards. And then millennial is, I think, 1982, so they have different buckets for all these people. And then baby boomers are, of course, people that are nearing retirement. What value means to those different categories of customers are different, and how do we generate value for them? So before we go any further, I want us to take a quick poll. Can we bring the poll online? So in the poll, I want to ask 3 questions. You should see the poll on your on your right-hand side of the WebEx. The first question is anybody thinking or working to start implementing a digital transformation? The second question is, are you in the process? And then the third question is there a future roadmap? Do you have a roadmap? So you just need to click yes or no, and we'll open the poll for about 2 minutes. And then we'll all take a look at what the poll looks like. Can we see the result of the poll? I think the result of the poll should be coming up time soon. Okay, so let's, if everybody can see the result of the poll, but let's take a look at it. So is anybody considering working to start? So 49% says they're considering starting or implementing digital transformation. And 49% also says no. So it's almost a 50-50 split. So am I reading this correctly? Oh, so 49% says yes, and 3% says no. So there's no answer from 49%. So from those that answered, you know, obviously a lot of people are already thinking or started to think about implementing the digital transformation. And are you in the process? So 41% says yes, they're in the process, and only 12% says no. So that's interesting. So a lot of people are in the process, but we still have a significant number of people that are thinking about digital transformation, but they're not yet in the process. And then is there a future roadmap? So 31% says yes, and 23% says no. So this is very interesting statistics. I would have hoped that everybody participated, but let's go through this slides and let's try to see what are the challenges that people are actually having in moving forward, you know, in doing these things. So, but before we go on, I'll pass this on to Gbenga to talk about some of the key trends and how executives are addressing those trends. Gbenga.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And you know, Michael had a great start to kind of at least give us a heads up on, you know, what is this story about. But then I wanted to kind of focus on what is driving the force for digital transformation, and are there key forces around, you know, all of these drivers. I'll start with, you know, last year was a dramatic year for everyone globally. No one could have predicted what happened in 2020. If prior to 2020, people were thinking, oh, well, yeah, digital transformation, it's a maybe. After the 2020 experience, it's a matter of survival, no doubt. Because no one could have predicted that, you know, everyone will be pushing the concept of working from anywhere. And there's no way you could do that if you don't have the platforms or the capability to be able to kind of equip your workforce and at the same time empower your customers or your clients to be able to reach you or you provide services to them. 2020 was a game changer. It was the COVID pandemic. It was, you know, a big challenge on every enterprise, every organization across the globe. And how do they meet this need where, you know, all of your workforce need to be able to work, but then they cannot be together in a single building. So there was this push for work from home. There was this push from work from anywhere. There was this push for making services available to customers, either professional services or even retail services or any kind of services that you're into, to your customers, because they cannot come to you, but you have to go to them using a digital experience. So that was one of the biggest trends that has changed the course of digital transformation. And coming out of 2020, a lot of organizations have been thinking, look, this is no longer something that we just have to kind of roll back all of this capability. It seems like everyone and even consumers are used to this new world of virtualized experience, and it's going to be the case for the future. Now, prior to all of the 2020 experience, there's been huge proliferation of IoT devices where you have smart devices, smart appliances, and that has caused a lot of proliferation of data You just have your data sitting everywhere, sitting on people's laptop, sitting on people's hand devices, sitting even on appliances or smartwatches or all of this, IoT enabled technologies that is driving the need for how consumers use data, so how your customers use data. So that's a major trend that's also kind of, driving digital transformation that we've seen. The other piece is you have a change in consumer preference. Now, consumers are increasingly impatient. They want a real-time experience. They want real-time access. They want real-time engagement. They want real-time, I just want to click and have my stuff delivered in the next couple of hours or the next day. They don't want to wait so long to have, all of their services kind of delivered to them. During the COVID era, I personally used it, right? I want all my groceries to be delivered within a couple of hours at my doorstep because I don't want to go to the store because I'm trying to protect my family. So this changing in consumer behavior is driving the way businesses have to do, provide services or render any of their business, proposition to customers because the consumer behavior has increasingly changed. The other piece, I'm not going to run through this entire piece, but the other one that I really kind of want to focus on is there's this competition around cost leadership due to reducing prices and rising costs. Every business wants to kind of improve their bottom line, and they're finding new ways to kind of make sure that they reduce costs, they reduce their overhead, and digitizing some of all of these experiences or your operations or your systems is one way that organizations are really kind of looking to save on money, to increase their margin, to be able to kind of report better results to their stakeholders or their shareholders, as it were. But then, what does this whole trend of consumer behaviors, of COVID, of data being everywhere, what does it mean to the technology platforms, right, that are supporting all of these enterprise capabilities? There are three things that it means. It means you need, one, more computing power. You need to have supercomputers, quantum computers these days. In some cases, like that's the push that organizations are driving now to be able to support all of these processing needs. For instance, to be able to respond to the real-time engagement that customers need, to the real-time processing of data that customers need. I want the bank transaction to be done. I want it to be transferred immediately. I don't want to wait the next day to be able to, have whoever I'm sending money to, either in the diaspora or locally, or I'm doing a transaction. I want that to reflect on the same day. So there's huge computing power that's required to get this done. And what does that mean also? Because you have huge data everywhere, it means you have to have huge pipes through which this data can be transported across the board, right? You have to have huge pipes where you can easily transport these data across the board. And that means bigger network bandwidth. It means bigger infrastructures from your networking point of view to be able to support all of this data transport back and forth, either within your enterprise environment or across to maybe your business partners or to your customers or to those who need these services from you. So that's the second force that is driving all of this, change. The third force that drives this is, we need computing power. It means we're processing a lot of data, right? We need huge pipes through which this data can be transported, but also all of the data that either we're sending or receiving from our customers need to be stored somewhere. It means you need huge storage capacity to be able to accommodate where the data is going to be put for further processing or for storage for other business use. So all of these three forces combined together are really what's driving the changes in the technology landscape. Because now, different organizations that are responsible for each of these different driving forces are able to kind of produce higher computing power machines that can respond to the need of processing data or processing transactions to telecommunication company are coming up with huge data pipes as well, where you can easily transport this data back and forth without major delays on processing, because you have high CPU, high latency sensitive, interaction that needs to happen, and you need a big pipe to be able to accommodate that transport. And lastly, around storage capacity, so you're seeing huge storage capacity being built. But more importantly, from an executive leadership point of view, how are CEOs or CIOs or CTOs responding to this trend? Some of the things we've seen is that most CEOs are thinking about their workforce. How do I prepare my workforce for the future? Right? Because it's not just about the technology, it is also giving them the capability and the training that's needed to prepare them, for the future. That includes upskilling them. So how do you overall, deploy the capabilities that digitize your employee and customer experience in this area where when you're not limited to a physical boundaries, your customers are everywhere in the globe, they're everywhere in their houses, they're everywhere and need services that they need access to. So most CEOs are thinking of that today, not just from their employee experience, they're also thinking of it from their customers or their consumers. So that how do you deliver this digital experience to them in a way that they can easily articulate it. I'm going to slow down a bit because I think I'm a bit fast. So I'm going to slow down a bit so that at least I can get the communication across. The second piece of trend I've seen is that there is an increased adoption in automation. And what do I mean by that? A lot of organizations have manual back office or middle office processes that they have to deal with today. And the amount of energy or resources that are spent on, working on those manual, back office or middle office items is taken away from productivity from the workforce. So CEOs are thinking, look, how do I free up time from some of these manual items so that my workforce or my employees can focus more on innovating, on actually delivering value? For instance, I have reports that I have to do every month that takes tons of hours of X number of resources. Is there something I can do to automate the reporting capabilities so that I can free up maybe 3-4 staffs or X number of resources to really kind of focus on, can I roll out new products quickly? Do I need to change, my customer experience, like actually delivering value to customers and delivering value to the bottom line of the business. The other piece that we've seen in terms of, how CEOs and CTOs are responding is you're seeing an increased amount of people going away from traditional infrastructure to much more modern infrastructure. And what do I mean by that? We're seeing more people and a huge number of organizations say, look, why do I need to spend X amount of my resources on managing an infrastructure that is not really, really my core business, when I can afford to move this workload to a cloud provider who will be responsible for paying all of the energy bills, who will be responsible for managing the servers, who will be responsible for figuring out, in some cases, I need patches, I need to kind of upgrade systems, and I just want to focus on my core business. And that gets me what? A reduction in cost of overhead. 2, it gets me more productivity because I can quickly get to market faster. So we do completely see these trends. Now, I don't want to kind of read through the entire trends, but we have it all kind of, speculated there. I want to take a pause to take a poll to see what people are seeing as trend within their own spaces. Eva, if you don't mind, can we share that poll? I just want to get a sense of, is any of these trends familiar with you? Are there other trends that you're seeing that you think are outside of this scope? So we have about 2 minutes to complete this poll. And we'll run through the questions. I think the first question here is, how familiar are you with the trends that we talked about? The second question is any of these trends impacting your own organization? And if yes, how are you responding to it? I also want to kind of add a caveat to that to say, if you have other trends that it's not mentioned on this deck, please feel free to type that in the chat as well. We want to know what those trends are, and if we can also kind of at least add that to our talking point later in the conversation. I will say, if we're not getting any other response, we could share the result of the poll. All right, let's see what the poll says. Great. All right. I see the outcome. Let's see. All right. So we have about 36% will say they are familiar with a trend, and about 6% will say they're not. So of those who responded, I think that's a huge percentage. It's very interesting. So it seems like a lot of people have can resonate with one or more of this trend, which is good. That's the second question. Is any of these trends impacting your domain? It seems like 27% said, of those who responded, said, sorry, 27% of all participants said, yes, they have seen this trend and it impacts their domain. And about 11% said it does not impact their domain. So that's still a huge percentage of, number of people who responded. It's about, 70% or thereabout of people are saying this trend is impacting their domain. All right, great. All right, if yes, I think that's going to be a text. I'm not sure if we've seen any actual text in. Great. All right, so I do see, okay, I don't see anything in the, in the chart. So that's great. I'm going to pass on the ball to kind of to Michael right now, so as we further explore. So what do you do about this trend? What is the approach? What are key values that, value proposition for actually going in the direction of digital transformation? Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Benga. I think maybe next time we do this type of poll, it would be nice to also include the industries of participants, because it would be nice to understand. So for example, the 11% that haven't seen that this trend is not impacting them, it would be just nice to know what industry those participants are. But Iba, can you go to the next slide, please? So on this next slide, so we're getting into the meat of today's session, is what the digital transformation framework looks like. Now, people different people approach digital transformation in several ways. I think when we did the earlier poll, I believe 49% said they're already building some type of digital transformation journey. So maybe some of the things we have on this framework, some of the elements may be familiar to you. But if we think about digital transformation as a whole, what this framework is saying is, what are the things you want to look at? Now, we talked about, digitizing your customer experience. We talked about building your data analytics capabilities. We talked about digitizing your operations and systems. And then we also talked about digitizing the organization. But if we double click on each of those elements, then we can then get into the meat of what we really mean when we say digitize your customer experience. So that will mean, for example, creating an omni-channel experience for your customer. And the next few slides actually go in details in all this. It also means, do you have the digital marketing capabilities in place to acquire your customers? And also, how good are your CRM capabilities, your customer relationship management capabilities, to be able to generate insights about your customers? In short, how well do you know your customers? Now, when we think about data and analytics, we talked about different types of data. And especially for people that work in the financial services industry, we get a lot of data, from customer information themselves. We get a lot of data from call center. We get a lot of data from our online platform. But in most cases, the challenge we have is putting some kind of governance around this data so that we can maintain the data integrity and we can actually use those data. In fact, most of the time, data in the financial services industry, even though there's so many data, they become unusable because either they have integrity issue or there's no way to tie those data together, which is something that we're talking about here. How do we tie them together? But also, how can we deploy analytics capabilities, either predictive analysis using artificial intelligence or machine learning capabilities to help synthesize this data? And also on the process, on the digitizing operations and systems perspective, we talked about an example is a process automation. Now, a lot of us, that are very familiar with HR operations, IT operations, accounting operations, and all those critical middle and back office functions, which are very manual. A lot of them are done very manually, very inefficiently. How do we automate all these processes using the right digital tools? And then we talk about process centralization, which means if you look at your process from an end-to-end perspective, is it possible to have all your processes on a single platform? Because that way it makes things much easier for you. It is more streamlined. You build in straight through processing and you reduce your cost in the process. And then we talk about your core system and your infrastructure. Now, maybe, in Jordan, some banks may not necessarily struggle with this, or some of the telcos, because they are much, modern. But when you look at, some of the markets and like even in the US, a lot of the banks, because these are banks that are, 100 years old, decades old, they build their infrastructure on mainframes, on, siloed kind of infrastructure, which makes it very difficult to change or to, turn out products and so on and so forth. So what we're talking about here is that how do you modernize those infrastructure, into something that's more microservice driven, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're talking about here. And then when we talk about the organization, so one of the questions we had was, who are the key stakeholders within the ecosystem? All right. And, for a country, when we talk about our ministries in technology, when we talk about the fintechs as an operators, when we talk about the banks, when we talk about other regulators, all these people, how do they tie in together to provide value for the ecosystem? And then when we look about, when we think about our own company ourselves, our people, what tools and infrastructure do we have in place for them to collaborate and for them to work innovatively? Now, before COVID, people will go into the office, people will do their work, people will go back home. But in COVID, people have to work from home. Now, how do you still ensure that people can still work collaboratively in a productive manner? And then Gbenga also talked about the skills. Do people actually have the digital skills to be able to operate in this world? All right. Can people use the virtual systems? Can people, do their presentation? Can people collaborate in building software, everything virtually? So that's what we're going to take some time to. Now, I think we have a question. Let me just take a look at it. Quick one. Digital transformation is different than automation. If so, what is the difference and border between both of them? And I think I can quickly answer that question. So automation is pretty much deploying technological tools to streamline or make a process efficient. So for example, you have, you're trying to automate your accounting system, or you're trying to automate some processes within your HR system. And there, the tools that you can use to do that, you can automate using RPA, robotic process automation, that try to ensure you're building a straight-through processing capability into the process. That's your automation. But digital transformation is a much broader topic than automation. I think a good way to think about it is, when you look at our framework, you see we talk about process automation as one element within the broader digital transformation. So digital transformation is about having a strategy. It's a strategy you need to have in place to make sure everything ties together. Like, you can do process automation as one of your projects, that's fine. But that's still not digital transformation. The digital transformation has to be holistic, because you have to think about everything as a whole. Think about it from this framework you see on your page. You're thinking about your data, you're thinking about your customer, you're thinking about your processes, you're thinking about your organization, and how all this ties in together. That's digital transformation. Why automation is just, leveraging automation capabilities to digitize a particular process. I hope that answers that question. Because of time, let's quickly jump into the next slide. And let's take a deep dive into digitizing your customer experience. Now, when we talk about customer experience, we're talking about, how do you access? How do you engage? How do you customize? And how do you connect and collaborate with your customers? How do you do this? That's what we're talking about. Now, if you look at your current organization today, I'm sure a lot of us will agree that what you see under the traditional model is how we do things today. So when you think about your customers, you think about them as a mass market, especially within our public service, our government bodies. We think about our customers as mass market. We generalize our customers. But in the digital model, you don't generalize your customers, because your customers are different. And you need to be able to understand that your customers are different. And when you develop your product and services, you have to tailor it to your customers. Now, from a communication perspective, the way we do it today is that because we think our customers are the same and it's a mass market, the communication goes from us, from the company, to the customer. So either you do it through your website or your TV ads or your radio or whatever, your media channels, the communication goes to the customers. But in the digital world, you need to have capability to ensure that the communication is two ways. So that means your customer can communicate, they can recommend to you, and then you can do the same thing. And we've seen that with Instagram, with Twitter, with a lot of social media platforms that enables customers and companies to engage both ways. Today, we think about firm as the influencer, especially within banks. The banks believe they can come up with products and impose them on the customers. Or they actually can drive customers' engagement of the product. But in the digital model, customers can actually do those work for us. And now customers are the influencer. I think it's important to go through all these things because it helps to change our mindset. So if I go back to the question that I think Mustafa asked, difference between digital transformation and automation. Digital transformation is thinking holistically about the entire organization and how you put in a strategy for it, which is different from automation. That's what this is saying. It's about changing your mindset and changing your business model. Now, if we think about some of the key management challenges, I believe one of the questions we got when we started this session, somebody asked, what are the challenges people face in digital transformation? And that's what you should think about the questions we have below here. So let's think about omni-channel experience as an example. And I'll use a use case for you. Let's say a customer wants to open a loan account and walks into the branch to open his loan account. And he fills the forms and everything. And for some reason, the customer cannot complete the application. So they said, okay, you have to come back to do your application. So the customer leaves the branch, and then the customer decides to call into the call center of the bank to complete the application. But unfortunately, when the customer calls, the customer has to start all over again because the people in the call center do not have the information that the customer already started when the customer went to the branch. Okay, now if that same customer decides to use his mobile to complete the application, and when he gets into his mobile, the customer finds out that a lot of the forms and applications that he or she has done in the branch or on the call center, the customer can find it on the mobile app. Now, what is the issue here? The issue is that there's disparity in experiences across all those different channels. And what we're saying here is, how do we create an omni-channel experience for the customer? That means the customer that started off in the branch can continue that same application on the call center or even online, because at the back end, everything is synchronized together. That's what we're talking about. And this is one of the key challenges when we're thinking about digitizing the customer experience. How do we create a uniform experience for the customer, regardless of any channels that the customer is interacting with our organization? The second key issue is the insight. How well do we know our customers? And how well are those information stored in our customer relationship management systems? From the customer's profile to demographics to what they like and so on and so forth. You know, it's so interesting that some of the even at home, I have a smart fridge, and the smart fridge is able to recommend to me some of the things that I like based on how much the smart fridge knows I buy those stuff. So it's about insight. It's about every transaction or every interaction that the customer has with us is being logged into a database. And how much can we build in machine learning or AI capabilities for us to be able to recommend the best and the right value to our customers? And that takes me to this third challenge that executive needs to address, which is digital marketing. Nowadays, regardless where you are, either in the United States or you're in Jordan or you're far Asia or you're in Africa, digital marketing is becoming very critical. Now, not only for private organizations, but even for government bodies, is how can you leverage digital marketing to effectively target your customers and provide them the right questions. So from digitizing customer experience, these are the key challenges that management needs to think about when they're thinking about developing their digital transformation strategy. Building omnichannel experience, having the right customer insights capability, and also the digital marketing capability. If we go on to the next slide, we'll talk about digitizing the organization. And I won't go through like the traditional model to digital model because I know we're running out of time. But let's think about some of the key management challenges that needs to be addressed. And the first one is around digital collaboration and innovation. So how do we break down the silos between, our app builders and our testers, to work, in an integrated version to deliver services? How do we break silos between front office, our salespeople, and back office, our operations people, to work seamlessly together to develop or to provide services for our customers? And what tools can we use? So for example, we're on WebEx today. We have Teams, we have Zooms. And a lot of all these tools also have collaboration capabilities. For example, we can share ideas, we can do whiteboarding, we can do all those things. So to what extent are we leveraging all those capabilities within our organizations for us to be able to work more efficiently? Now we talk about the second issue is how do I build digital skills and make my workforce very virtual. One of the engagement that I recently worked on is about assessing the digital skills of the workforce. And it's very interesting to learn that a lot of the employees actually do not have the right digital skills for them to be able to operate in this era. And what do we mean by digital skills? Being able to be familiar with digital tools, all the digital tools that we have around us, even digital collaboration tools, and be able to understand what capabilities those things can deliver. A lot of our workforce don't have those knowledge. How can we leverage, social media to really interact or to communicate with our customers and so on and so forth? These are the challenges that executives are thinking about, and how do we address it? And Gbenga talked about how much do we spend on training? What is our budget for building digital capabilities and training for our workforce? And the last one is talking about the ecosystem. So for the ministry, what is the interaction from the ministry with everybody within the ecosystem, with fintechs, with the NGOs, with the banks, with the telcos, with the merchants? How do we facilitate, conversation and useful value exchange using digital capabilities within the ecosystem? For banks, initially we thought of fintechs as those people that have come to eat our lunch, but that is not the case. The case is really how do we collaborate with the fintechs, either the processors, the issuers, or the gateways, to make sure that you create an ecosystem where everybody can actually compete and then can survive there. So that's what we're thinking about here. When we think about developing your digital transformation strategy, these are some of the issues that you need to address. So I'll take a pause here before we go further. And I think we can also take another quick poll. Can we have the next poll, please? I think, can we see the result of the poll? We have responses. Okay, so I think we can quickly move over to the next two elements of the digital framework, and Benga will take us through those.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. That's great. Can we move on to the next slide? All right. So here we want to talk about, and I think Michael touched on this. So I'm not going to spend too much time on focusing on comparing the traditional model versus digital model. I think Michael did a great job. Really kind of talk about some concept around.
The answers will be now on the screen. We will have interesting answers. So maybe Lena can help. Sorry for interruption, but I just wanted to make sure that you read the answers because it sounds interesting.
Yeah. Michael, can you see the answer on the screen? And do you want to speak to it?
Yes. So there's one, what are you doing in shifting from traditional model to digital model? Training employees on digital tools, which is very important to train our employees on how they can use some of these digital tools that we're talking about. And what are the key challenges we have discussed that you are facing while implementing your digital transformation is about how you can collaborate better with your competitors, which is also a very good question to ask. We talked about, and I think it's important for us to really understand the value chain of where we are. So as a bank, what does my value chain is for whatever product or services that I offer? Or as a payment company, what does my value chain looks like? You know, especially for people operating within payments. You know, initially it was very easy. You are either an issuer, a processor, a network, or a merchant. But now it's a different ball game, because now you have a lot of gateways that are coming into the mix. Think of people like Stripe, think of people like, you know, PayPal, who have integrated across the entire value chain. And, you know, if you're a payment firm or a company or a processor, you then have to start thinking, how can I collaborate to succeed, and not necessarily think of my competitors as the rival. All right. And these are some of the things we need to start thinking about. How do you leverage digital transformations to facilitate those collaborations? How it could be maybe acquiring a company, it could be maybe through partnership, and so on and so forth. You know, for a lot of banks here in the US, they've started building a lot of AI capability into their mobile phones. So AI that would advise you on your, you know, finances, on how you're spending it, if you're going to have an overdraft, and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of those capabilities are possible because there was a lot of collaboration between banks and the fintechs, which 3, 4, 5 years ago, nobody was thinking about collaboration. People were thinking about fintech has come to hit my launch. I need to build that capability. But now it's a different mindset. How can we collaborate to offer the services? And I think that's the way we should think. What does my value chain looks like? And do I need to collaborate with people ahead in the value chain or behind in the value chain to offer the services? So I think that's the way to address that. Benga, can you please go on?
Great. Just to piggyback on what Michael just said, one of the value chain for this is, how do you digitize operational systems? And when you think about that, you're thinking of, how do I make sustained profitability, right? How do I stay nimble and keep my operational ecosystem agile enough to take away all of the bottlenecks of, you know, bureaucracy or manual processing, to get me to a place where I can take products to the market quicker at a lower cost, and have options to my customers on how I can essentially make my profit margin, you know, better, so that I can also reinvest that money into my system to bring in new or deliver new products to the market, right? So that's the way I want us to think about digitizing operation and systems. And there are 3 key management challenges that I want us to kind of talk through, and I'll try as much as possible to kind of over this. I know we have a lot of examples that we've, you know, further down the slide that talks about each of these pieces. I think the first thing I want us to really kind of focus on is around process automation. And around this, what are we talking about? We're talking about, what technologies do I need to kind of leverage, you know, to, you know, for instance, look at my IT operations, and I can automate some of the manual processing. A good example would be this. It takes 3 days to provision laptops or access to resources that I'm onboarding. If you're in the fast-moving ecosystem where you have to onboard employees or temporary staffs very quickly, you have 1,000 of them to kind of onboard and deploy quickly. And if you take 3 days to kind of deploy just one system, that's almost like impossible for you to kind of, you know, get them all of the capability they need to kind of, you know, hit the ground running and start delivering to your customers. So what if you can automate user provisioning, right, for all of your new employees or even your customers or your partners, that, you know, takes away all of the bottlenecks of having to do some manual processing? So can you create an automated platform where, once you get sample data from all of these users, all of the provisioning processes are automated, and you can get them running quickly? That's one piece. The other piece is around, how do I digitize, you know, my process create a digital process centralization. And the real focus of this is around how can I, as an organization, adopt, a common end-to-end process that is transparent, one, and that supports a common technology platform. I want to go away from where I have siloed processes to an integrated process where the end-to-end process is completely transparent to my users, either be it my employees or my customers or my partners, and it's fully integrated in such a way that the experience is consistent across the board. And what does it buy you? It just buys you that nimble process where you don't have to go through 10 approvals to get one common task done or to get one common process get done. I do want to kind of be, I'm conscious of time because I know we're running out of time. The third piece, which I really kind of want to focus on, is the core system and infrastructure. How do I modernize that to support all of these nimble processes, nimble development process, for instance, if I want to roll product to the market, nimble operations, if I want to make sure that I cut down cost and waste on my, back end and, my back end and middle end systems. Now, what we've seen, at least from my own vetting point of view, is that you now see that people are looking more into integration. How do I create a product that integrates across the board? Michael mentioned earlier that, from a fintech point of view, you don't see financial institutions don't see them as potential competitors anymore. They see them as what? As collaborators. Now, what does that mean from a technology platform? I need to be able to create APIs, for instance, that can integrate with different technology platforms. If I want to onboard a customer, a partner, I don't want to take 10 days or go through bureaucratic process to have them onboarded. Why do I just create an API where people can plug and play, right? You just integrate with my APIs. We've agreed on what security piece, is required for our integration process. We've agreed on what kind of data we're sharing through that API. We've agreed on what capabilities we want to share through that API. So you're really trying to create a core infrastructure system that is modernized, that is, very flexible and agile, but more importantly, can integrate with any system, so across any ecosystem. So that's the core message in this piece of of the slide. So I want to kind of move us along because I think we want to get to the use cases, like how are customers or how are other industries, leveraging some of these things we're talking about. What value are they getting from it? So so over to you, Michael. I just want us to be able to kind of get to that point where we get to the use cases and really kind of talk about, what we've seen out there. Oh, sorry, I think I still want the next slide. Next slide, please. Eva? All right, so we talked about data. And what I really want to kind of focus here now is data is actually the new gold. Now, the traditional model of the future takes so much for you to kind of acquire data. It's so expensive for you to get data into your environment. And that's because before now, data was not democratized. Today, data is available everywhere, right? Data is, it's something you can really have come to you if you create the platform for your customers actually to put in data freely, if you create a customer for your partners to create data freely, so you don't have that huge cost of acquisition of data today. But the key question is, what do I do with this data, right? And different, industries have different regulations around how data needs to be managed, especially if those data are sensitive data, if those data have to do with customer information, with PII, with PCI, or all of those regulatory frameworks that requires specific protections. So one of the huge challenges that this digital model presents is around data governance and management, right? Because one, in as much as you want to kind of mine this data from an analytical point of view to kind of at least create intel and insight on how to deliver new values or new experience to your customers, you also want to be cognizant of the fact that this data has to be managed appropriately so that you don't create unnecessary liability to your organization or to your bottom line. So the key question is, what are the security considerations I need to take into perspective if I want to get onto this journey of what do you call it, of digital transformation. And now, what kind of data do I get? How do I receive it? How do they interact within my ecosystem? Do I need to protect them in some way versus the other? Do I need to segregate the data to ensure that I'm not mixing up data that I don't have to mix up that will put me under regulatory scrutiny? So creating an ecosystem where you have data governance as a core front of it, and where you have a data architecture that supports your digital journey is very important. What I've seen as a mistake for most organizations during my consulting years is that people get on digital transformation journey without thinking through, how am I using data? What do I need data for? But even more importantly, what kind of data should I be collecting? Because it's not just sufficient for you to collect the data. What you're hoping to accomplish through digital transformation is that you want data to drive the decisions you make. You want data to drive what kind of new services or products you're rolling out to either your customers or to your partners. You want data to drive how you make decisions on what to invest in and what not to invest in. So this brings me to that next question around analytic capabilities and deployment. So we've seen organizations leverage AI, machine learning, and big data to enhance data and bring that richness of that data in a way that's secured and in a way that brings out the appropriate insight, into all of these key pieces of data, and it's helping them make smart decisions on where to focus on their investment on, to from a customer experience point of view, where to focus their effort. They're listening to what the customer wants, how they want to use data, how they want to be engaged, how they want to be interacted with. I think these two key pieces are very, very crucial, management challenge that needs to be properly addressed before you even think of being successful on your digital transformation journey. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Gbenga. So now that we've gone through the digital transformation framework, we all know the key elements we need to consider when we want to create a digital transformation strategy. We also know what are the key management challenges that we need to think about that needs to be addressed. This next two slides actually outlines the approach. So the approach we should be taking when we want to build our digital transformation journey. So the first step you want to do is what we call the internal analysis. Internal analysis is understanding you as an organization. And we call it a current state assessment because you need to know what level of digitization you currently have in the different functions you have in the organization. So it could be marketing. What level of digitization exists in your marketing today? What level of digitization exists in your operations? Your HR operations, in your accounting operations, in your finance operations. What is the level of digitization? You need to take an inventory of that. What is the level of digitization in your customer service? So we talked about leveraging online, mobile, contact center, or whatever. What is the level of the digitization in all those things? In your IT operations, and also in the systems and the infrastructure you have. A lot of people are still operating on-prem, and now some people are migrating to the cloud, and some people are just using pure SaaS products. So you need to take a current state assessment of where you are. And once you do that, you then need to do an assessment of your organization's capabilities, especially when it comes to your talent and skills. Now, remember, digital transformation is going to be implemented by people. And if your people do not have the right skills to be able to drive that initiatives, most of the time it's going to fail. In fact, most of the times that digital transformation has slowed or has failed is because the right people to actually implement it do not have the right skills. So those are some of the assessments you need to do. And then you need to do what we call your organization transformation readiness. There's a lot of transformation and a lot of change that comes with digital transformation. And if your organization is not ready for that, it's going to be a lot of wasted effort and wasted investment. So there needs to be some kind of organization readiness to understand how mature you are. And this is actually very important, especially if you're a government body. You need to understand what is the organization change readiness. There's a research that was just conducted just within the pandemic by Granicus. Granicus is a well-known research company, and they did a lot of research on the government, and citizens. And the research is how do government and citizen feel digital transformation needs to be implemented in most government bodies after the pandemic. And it's interesting that 82% of government bodies said the right investment must be made in digital transformation in all their services. Now, as we all know, government bodies in most places that I've worked are the ones that struggles with change management a lot. So this comes back to the organization readiness, stuff that we talked about, that you have to be ready before you embark on the journey. Step 2 is, so now you understand internally, now you need to understand what is happening on the outside world. So you need to understand the trends. Now, we talked about a lot of the trends as part of this presentation from a customer perspective, from a product perspective, from a channels, from a technology, from partners. You need to understand all those trends, and you need to know how they are impacting you as an organization. One of the big trends with the COVID is a lot of customers doesn't want to go to the bank branches anymore. If that is the case with your own situation, that means a lot of investment has to be done in your mobile and online channel, right? So you need to understand the trends and how they impact you. Then you need to understand your peer, you need to do some kind of peer analysis within the use of digital transformation technology. So which technology tool do you want to use, or which one is right for you? People are talking about IoT, Internet of Things, which people are talking about AI, people are talking about, but which one really is the right one for you? We also need to talk about, sorry, you're moving the slide. Can you go to the next slide, please? We need to talk about, how do you then, now you understand your organization, you understand everything happening around you, then we need to prioritize the opportunity, because as you can see now, digital transformation can be very big because you need to touch different parts of your organization. But you need to have some kind of prioritization. You need to be able to prioritize where you want to invest money. So you need to identify your low-hanging fruits and the quick wins. So what are the quick wins that you need to quickly put some investment money in to start transforming your systems? And then after that, you can then start thinking about, what does your target operating model looks like? How would I operate in the future? Digital transformation will result in you needing to shift some people across departments because they're no longer creating value at a particular place. It needs to train a lot of people. Your reporting structure or your organization chart may need to change. All these things, you need to put it into consideration in defining what your target operating model looks like. And after all that is done, you need to then build your multi-year digital transformation roadmap. Digital transformation is not a 8 weeks, 12 weeks program. It's a journey, all right? Sometimes it's a multi-year program because you also don't want to rush things, right? So you want to take it step by step. Because of change management, you need to understand people need to ease into it because you're changing people's mindset. So these are some of the steps, some of the approach that you need to take into consideration when you're developing your digital transformation. And remember, especially for people in the private sector, you still need to present your case to the board. So that means you need to build the business case for each of the investment you need to make, and then you need to present those cases to the board. And the board wants to see clearly what the return on investment, if they're putting X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, what really am I getting from it? And that's what we're going to discuss in the next few slides to give you some practical examples of what are the business case, what are the return of investment when you go with digital transformation. So can we go to the next page? Next slide, please. So when we talk about, no, sorry, can you go back? So when we talk about the business case for digital transformation, we're talking about why, if somebody is asking me to put down $50,000 or $100,000 into an engagement, how does that help me? How does that, now remember, we talked about it initially that customer is changing, so you have to change, otherwise you lose your customers. Okay, yeah, that's fine. At least from a private sector perspective, that's fine. But what about from a government body perspective? All right. But so you have to be able to balance what are the financial benefits I get from this, and also what are the fiduciary or what are the non-financial benefit that I get from this. And they all needs to balance, especially when you're making your case to your CEO or you're making your case to your board of directors. And we'll talk about some of this use case. The way we've done this is we've broken it down into two different sets of use case. Some use case that you can work with on the front office side. So front office means customer facing processes, and on the back office side, which is more technology and operations focused. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's think about the first use case, which we're seeing a lot of people actually using digital only channels for customer acquisition. And based on some of the things we've seen and also some of the research of what people are doing, they've noted that the value from using digital only distribution channels for customer acquisition actually results in about 80% reduction in your acquisition cost. Now, I'll throw out some numbers. In the financial services, in the banking sector, when you talk about your acquisition cost per customer in the US and also in Europe, is usually about $1,000 per customer to acquire a customer. Now, if you think about some of the neobanks, so neobanks are digital-only banks. So these are banks that wouldn't have branches or any of all those things. A lot of these neobanks can actually do this at less than $100. In fact, Chime, which is one of the fast-growing neobank in the US, the average customer acquisition rate is about, I think, $57, compared to what the big giants like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and the rest of them can actually spend up to $1,000 to acquire a customer. Now, how is this possible? Now, of course, there's the case because a digital-only bank, you do not have a branch, so you don't have a lot of cost to put in branch staff to add and all that. Yes, we get all that. But the key thing here is, how do you digitize the entire process from the first time the customer sees your brand? So either they sees your brand on the media channel, or they sees your brand through your email marketing material, or they see your brand through a social media platform, either Facebook or Instagram or whatever. How is it possible to then digitize that entire value chain up until the point that the customer actually signed for your product? That's what we're talking about here. So that means building in digital capabilities in making sure you can present your brand to those customers on those channels that we talked about. And of course, leveraging SEO, search engine optimization, and all those things to get to the customer. And also for the customer to be able to go from those channels onto your own platform and complete their application or buy your product without interfering with any of your employees. That's what we're talking about here. When you do that, what you do is that you drop down the customer acquisition, because remember, you don't have to spend so much on your customer support because you are making the customer do everything themselves. And a lot of the consumer product organizations have done this very well. The banks are trying to catch up. The telcos also have done it very well. But what we're saying here is that how do I digitize that entire platform? Now, of course, to be able to do that, you must have invested a lot of stuff in your back office to support that experience that you're creating with your customer. That is what this use case is talking about, digitizing that entire process. And what that does also for you is, because everything is digital, you can then personalize your product or services to the customer. And everything is streamlined, and then you can collect a lot of data. So that means you know exactly who is seeing your ads, who is seeing your product. You know exactly who is clicking on those ads. You know exactly who, signed up for a product, who actually made the purchase, who did not make the purchase, why they did not make the purchase, and then you can follow up with them. So that's what we're talking about there. Digitizing your distribution channels for customer acquisition. And what research has shown is that you can get up to 80% reduction in acquisition cost per customer compared to how much you currently do now. So another quick question you need to understand here is that, do you actually know your customer acquisition cost now? So that's something you may want to check with your marketing department or your finance department to tell you what the customer acquisition cost is. They should have that number. If they don't have that number, that is something you can calculate. And once you have that figure, you can then think about, if I digitize that entire value chain, what would that cost look like? And once you know what that cost looks like, you can then start to build your case for your CEO, for your board, to give you investment funds to do this. The second one is on digital-only channels for market penetration. And I'll use the financial sector as a use case. If we look at banks like Goldman Sachs that created the digital-only bank called Marcus. In case some of you are not familiar with Marcus, Marcus is the digital-only retail bank that Goldman Sachs launched about 5 years ago, thereabout. And in deposit mobilization, Marcus, I believed, grew by 108% in deposit acquisition, when the average deposit acquisition growth rate in the US was just 4%. Marcus was growing about 108%. And from an unsecured loan perspective, Marcus actually grew by, I believe, 83, let me check my notes, about 138%. Marcus grew by 138% from unsecured loans, when the average US bank was grown at 18%. Then the question then becomes, how come Marcus was growing that fast? And it was because Marcus, for some of you that knows Marcus, is a purely digital-only platform. In fact, the only way you can get your funds into Marcus, you have to transfer money from your other account into Marcus. So what we're saying here is that, and this is not only Marcus, we've seen that with other digital-only banks, Monzo, Starling, Revolut, N26. These are different, neobanks that have shown that if you try to use digital-only channels to get your customers, you can actually succeed, and you can actually succeed very, very well. The next, and the research we've seen is about 200% increase in digital sales if you try to go with this. So if you're thinking about implementing a digital only platform, either you're a government body or you're a private sector, this is what the research says that and with COVID, this number is probably going to increase. The third one I'm going to talk about here is the personalized offers across distribution channels. Now, for you to be able to do personalized offers, that means your lead engine solution has to have some capabilities. So from some of the projects and some of the engagements that I have done in the past, that means you need a lead engine that is able to do, campaign management for you. It's able to do, interaction tracking with your customers. It's able to do, lead distribution based on the way you've set up those profiles of the customers on your CRM systems. All right. It's able to do lead segmentation, and everything we're talking about ties back to data. See, when we talk about digital transformation, it's everything. So it ties back to data. That means your data about your customers, there has to be proper governance in place that makes sure the data is credible, the data has sound integrity, and then you can utilize those data. Chatbots and using digital agents for customer service and query support. Now, a lot of people are now investing heavily on using virtual agents, all right? Virtual agents and chatbots. So back in the days, you have your customer call center set up. Maybe they can attend to, 10,000, 20,000 people, or even 100,000 people per day. Now you have virtual agents that would handle over 1 million queries every day. So chatbot is also, a lot of areas where investment funds are going to, because so in a lot of times the queries that are coming from customers are things that you can address quickly by a robot, So, and these are some of the things that we're seeing. And you can resolve this issue even faster and even much more accurately, because you don't have to spend so much time on even training your people and everything, because the robots will address everything for you, right? Digital onboarding for account opening. Now, one of the projects that, and I'll use a client situation as an example. We realized that this client, when customers were being onboarded into the platform and the loan portfolio for a particular loan, the loan was being coded on the system, the loan were coded wrongly. And because the loan were coded wrongly, the amortization of the loan was actually impacting the customers. So imagine that. And the impact was a little bit, so they did not notice until after several years, they noticed that the amortization of the loan was actually wrong. And they've impacted customers up to tune of, tens of millions of dollars. So when they did a root cause analysis of what the issue is, they found out that when those loans were onboarded, because those loans were, the customers had to fill paper loan, and somebody had to then transcribe those paper loans into the system. The way the transcription was done wrongly, and that were impacting the customers. And that's why we're talking about digital onboarding. There's so many tools that can do it for you now. So people can deploy OCR, all right? Your optical character recognition that can quickly read your loan contract and then can quickly put all those information onto your system with close to zero error rate. So this is what we're talking about. So it's a straight-through processing. You don't need people to do that manual job, which is even low value in the first place, and it is error-prone. You get a computer or a robot to do that OCR. You can do it with NPL, to the natural language processing as well. When people talk, and then it transcribes that into the system, and then that amortization is done pretty well. So those are some of the uses, and it's also, you know, speed up your onboarding rate. So when people are filling in you know, your loan forms and then transcribing it, it takes days, sometimes it takes weeks. Now this will take you less than 10 minutes, you know. So that's what we're talking about. Digital identity with facial, voice, and behavioral metrics, which we've seen, especially with a lot of the phone apps. If you're going into your app, people are building in biometric capabilities into their app now, you know, or the facial and all that. It reduces the error rate and also the fraud prevalence in some of these applications. With your ATM machines, you know, people are building those capabilities into ATM machines, either voice or facial or fingerprints. And so these are some of the benefits, and these are some of the use case people are using, and these are some of the benefits that we're seeing. We'll take the last 15 minutes to go through from a back office perspective some of the use case that we see there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And I know we can move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. All right. I know we've kind of talked a lot about thank you. We've talked a lot about, you know, some of the front office stuff, like, you know, capabilities that we see in the industry today. Michael did a great job on that. I wanted to kind of initially start with the RP automation piece, but I kind of changed my mind on that, and I wanted to start with the cybersecurity piece, because I know we had a question earlier on in this presentation that really kind of talk about that. The truth is, yes, cybersecurity, what do you call it, breaches are prevalent today, and they're way sophisticated, right? Whether you have your traditional infrastructure or you have a digital infrastructure, those threats are real, and the numbers are going up. And that's because attackers are essentially leveraging digital capabilities to increase the sophistication of their own attacks. So the question is, and I've heard this from, you know, a lot of organizations when I was selling my consulting live, I've heard this from people to say, look, this is why I don't want to go the digital journey, because now I have my data everywhere. How do I secure it? It's like wide west out there. The truth is, your security posture doesn't necessarily, you know, increase or improve by staying in the traditional path. In actual fact, you're potentially going to have exposure, because even if you are not going on the digital journey, your customers, right, are leveraging digital capabilities, whether you like it or not, right? They have smart devices, smart appliances that they interact with, right? And most often than not, most of them are not educated enough on how to secure their own data and their own products. And they expect you to help them on that front. Secondly, your partners are going in that direction already, and you have to integrate with them. And the truth about your partners is that you share your own data with them and they send it back. So that threat is still there and real. Now, what's the good news on this? The good news is that, you know, even though you're going on the, you know, the digital journey, there are digital security capabilities that are out there today that can help you solve some of those problems. Now, what are some of the challenges we're seeing? One is, how do I protect my data, either at rest or when I'm sending it to my customers or sharing with my partners? How do I ensure that when I don't have regulatory liability in terms of the kind of data I gather? Right. Now, the boundaries of network is now everywhere. We've gone away from that place where you have firewalls or some sort of like security controls that protects all of your data and infrastructure within a wall of a data center. Even if you put all of those protections in place within that confine of your own enterprise, the truth is this: that data is still going out, either through your employees, either through a SaaS provider that you interact with, either through your third-party risk. Very recently, the major breach that hit the US was through a third-party system that was compromised, a third-party software that was compromised. So even though the US government were putting all of the securities in place to protect their data in-house, but guess what? The attackers still got in because the third party was breached. Now, some of the capabilities we're seeing in the industry today that's helping to kind of better protect digital assets, especially for those who are going on the digital journey, is around, one, knowing where your data is, knowing who is using the data, knowing how they are using the data, knowing what devices and systems they're using the data from, and more importantly, knowing what that data means to you as a business or as an organization. And that's why the concept of identity management comes into perspective if you want to be successful on your digital journey. So you have to leverage IAM capabilities that is able to contextualize your risk of exposure on your data, that is also able to kind of give you like the least privileged access to data, meaning people should not have access to data except they absolutely need it. And when they do, they're using the best and the secure way to do it. And some of the technologies you're using is one, advanced encryption, right? The whole concept of quantum computing is coming to light, which means encryption technologies that you use to kind of protect your data are going to be so weak that quantum computers can break them easily. So quantum encryption is what people now are not thinking of. Like I can have an encryption technology that's so adaptive that it protects my data in such a way that it increases the complexity of its breaking the more people are attempting to break it, right? And that includes encrypting that data while it's in transit, encrypting the data while it's sitting somewhere in a storage space, or encrypting it while it's within my infrastructures, to protect against, insider threats, right? So we've seen that organization that engages this visibility to kind of their data, meaning you have to have advanced visibility to what people are doing with that data. We're seeing that there's a great reduction in time to detect risk. What you don't want to find out is, oh, I've been breached. You want to be able to find out, well, someone is trying to breach my network and I'm able to protect it. So leveraging, great creative ways that, digital capabilities, provide to protect your data is actually very important. The concept of zero trust is also something that, people are embracing today. What do I mean zero trust? You're assuming that no one can be trusted within your infrastructure. And for that reason, they have to access your systems based on a proven identity, based on a proven device, based on a proven place where they can work from. Whether they're working from home or they're working from your office, it will determine what kind of security controls you're putting in place. I think that's important to kind of throw out there. The other piece around the security piece is that you have to create the right policies. A lot of organizations today, they get on digital transformation journey without creating the right security policies on how data should be used and how data should be managed. I thought it was important to kind of call that out. I also want to kind of touch on the concept of legacy infrastructure. The truth is this: so many organizations still have legacy infrastructure in place, and it is not an easy task to redesign or re-platform all of your applications. You can't do that by magic, right? The question is, what is the right journey to get from a place where I have legacy application, legacy infrastructure, which is still important for me to run my business, right? You still want to stay in the business. You still want to ensure that your customers, are getting service and you're not impacting your bottom line from an operation point of view. Now, I will give a very quick example of one of my customers when I was in consulting world. They are in the travel industry. They pretty much handle travel scheduling and logistics for most of the airlines in the world. I think they have 40% of the capacity of the airline booking and scheduling, including air traffic controls. And they have one large data center where all of their infrastructure sits. And what was the challenge they're having? They were running out of capacity for rack space. There's no more place for them to put servers. But more importantly, they were also running out of capacity for power to be able to kind of power this stuff. So they were at a place where they're like, they can no longer grow. And if anything happens to that data center, they're in trouble. So they were at this point of deciding, okay, well, should I go rebuild another data center, or should I move all of this platform to a cloud environment where I can leverage skill and take myself away from the burden of managing data centers? Now, the truth is that they went in the direction of moving to the cloud. And what were the drivers for them to move to the cloud on this? They realized that they can actually build a platform as a service where they are providing more like a middleware function across any cloud provider, so that any customer that they need to deploy services to, they can easily do a kind of plug and play approach, and without having to deal with managing a data center or managing the huge cost of maintaining power in one data center. And what benefits do they get from this? They realized about 40% cost reduction in their IT infrastructure cost. But more importantly, they were able to kind of get into a new market using their past platform as a service platform across different cloud providers. So no longer were they dealing with, oh, I have a data center that is limiting me, preventing me from growing, because I have to kind of think of how to get the servers there, how to get effective power to it, how to ensure that I'm having the right telemetry. They took that burden and put it on the cloud providers, and they're focusing on what they know how to do best, which is what? Building a platform for all of these airlines and all of these hotels and all of these travel logistics in the logistics space to leverage to deliver services to their customers. I know we're running out of time. I wouldn't have enough time to kind of run through all of this, but I wanted to see if there are other questions that we need to address before we run out of time. I'm over to you, Michael and Eva.
Yeah, thank you, Gbenga. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. If there are any other questions on everything we've talked about today, or if there's any other questions on the approach, on the use cases, if there's something that you're currently going through at work, at your company, and a challenge you would like some insight or some perspective, please post it in the chat and we can try to address it.
I think we have a question. Or maybe that was earlier. Sorry.
Yeah, I will hand over to Mr. Nidal. I think this is a good time to stop, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very valuable session. I really learned a lot personally. I'm sure the rest did learn as well. I would like to repeat my deep appreciation for Frontiers Global. It's a company in Jordan that are specialized in digital transformation, cybersecurity, financial technology, and I'm so proud of such company. As a member of the ICT Association of Jordan in Taj, I would love to see you guys, both of you in Amman in person soon. I hope this pandemic will be over very soon. Thank you so much, and definitely we'll stay in touch afterwards. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Nidal.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.